Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 to ask a question. I would like to inform all participants that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mr. Leland Milstein. Sir, you may begin.
Great. Thanks very much, Jennifer, and thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon for the AC Trees Thursday webcast. The Thursday webcast series is a monthly webcast held at the lunch hour by the Alliance for Community Trees. The trainings leverage local successes by amplifying to a larger audience 2 model organizations' methods, materials, and approaches. Sessions are planned to last no more than 1 hour, 2 presenters speaking on the same topic from slightly different perspectives, each for 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. This session is approved by the ISA for 1 CEU hour and by SAF for 1 CFE Category 1. If you haven't already given me your certification number for these continuing education credits, please email me after the session to make sure you get them. Also, most state landscape architecture boards require only a certificate of completion, which AC Trees can provide to any members who request one. So again, email me after the session if you need one of those. This is a program of the Alliance for Community Trees. If you're not already a member organization, please consider joining. I want to thank our sponsor for this webcast, the USDA Forest Service, and our 2 speakers, who you will hear a little bit more about in just a minute. Today's session is Storms Over the Urban Forest, Part 2, Post-Event Response. In the immediate aftermath of a natural disaster, surviving trees can become visual symbols of the catastrophic loss a community has experienced. Residents' responses to trees downed by hurricanes, tornadoes, or ice storms can vary from fear of replanting to impassioned calls for immediate replacement. Successful revitalization after a storm requires government, private, and nonprofit actors to distinguish between immediate responses and fully developed recovery plans that evaluate damage, assess community needs, and ensure best practices for replanting. We've got 2 speakers today who have extremely large amounts of knowledge on this situation, and unfortunately do, but we are glad that they can share that experience with us. First up today is Donna Coble, who was named Executive Director of Forest Relief of Missouri in January 2010. She joined the organization with more than 20 years of nonprofit leadership experience in the fields of education, healthcare, and social services. Prior to joining Forest Relief, Donna led the Ledoux Education Foundation, serving as its first executive director. Other past roles include oversight of 2 charitable foundations for Build-A-Bear Workshop and Director of Quality Service Development at St. Louis Children's Hospital. Donna is the immediate past president and current board member for Women's Safe House, is an active volunteer with Matthews Dickey's Boys and Girls Club, and has co-led Girl Scout Troop 593 since 2001. She has a Master of Arts in Public Administration from St. Louis University, and she's going to share with us her experience today from the incredible events that have occurred throughout the state of Missouri, but specifically also in Joplin earlier this year. Thanks so much for being with us today, Donna.
Thank you, Leland. Welcome, everyone. As you can see, the first photo on here is just a picture from Joplin of one of the many uprooted trees from that terrible storm that happened on May 22nd. I wanted to briefly share just a little bit about forest relief and just kind of give you some background. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we really got started back in 1989 as a result of an American forest initiative called Global Relief. Some of you may remember that. A local group came together and they organized the planting of 10,000 trees on the riverfront in St. Louis. And after that event, they all kind of looked at each other and said, okay, how do we keep this going? And so they formed a group called Forest Relief of Greater St. Louis, which then morphed into Forest Relief of Missouri in 1993. Just a couple of milestones on here. It was 2004 that we planted our 50,000th tree, and last year we awarded our 100,000th tree to a new park in St. Louis, North St. Louis, and there's a picture of that there. It's a bald cypress. So a couple of milestones. The other picture that's on there is a picture from our nursery. Our mission, really, our organization is, we just see ourselves as a catalyst for working throughout Missouri to help restore and sustain our urban forests. We have a nursery, community-assisted nursery, where we take seedlings that are provided by the state nursery and nurture them. Our forester, you see a picture of him there loading some trees onto a truck. He is helped by an army of volunteers who care for these seedlings, nurture these trees until they are ready for distribution. We give these trees away for free. We grow them both in 3-gallon and 15-gallon containers, and they're native species. This spring we containerized about 10,000 seedlings. Each spring and fall we give them away to nonprofits, municipalities, et cetera, for plantings all across Missouri and surrounding regions. Our goals have remained pretty consistent for a lot of years. We've been working collaboratively with the Missouri Department of Conservation, Missouri Community Forestry Council on specific programs. For instance, under contract with Missouri Department of Conservation, Forest Relief administers the Missouri Forest Keepers Network. We also have been responsible for helping the Missouri Community Forestry Council, with its anti-topping campaigns. However, what's really new, and it's really has come to a head here after a series of major storm events this year, is that we are really kind of finding ourselves in a new role with assisting with reforestation. So we're really kind of formalizing or stepping up our efforts to help where we can with this. So Joplin. Most everyone knows that it was an EF5 tornado that struck. That Joplin is in southwest Missouri. It left a huge swath of destruction. More than 160 people died, thousands of homes and businesses lost, about 30% of the city, and probably at least 10,000 mature urban trees. And Leland alluded to this before, but also we have had other storms this year. We had a significant tornado in Sunset Hills, which is a suburb of St. Louis, and many homes and hundreds of trees were lost, and Forest Relief has been working with city officials to help them develop plans and replant this fall and next spring, with some financial assistance from our local electric company, Ameren, Missouri. You may have also seen footage from the tornado that hit the St. Louis International Airport. We tend to hit like all the holidays, so the one was on New Year's Eve in Sunset Hills, and then Good Friday and at the airport. So don't think May 22nd was necessarily a holiday, though. It's been quite a year, but obviously all of them pale in comparison to what happened down in Joplin. You'll probably hear a lot more about this from Mac when he takes over in a few minutes, but it's just, with every tragedy or disaster, there's always a lot of challenges. There's also opportunities, but first, the challenges and what we're seeing is, city officials, emergency responders, they're used to taking care of emergencies. They're practiced at how to deal with, the human side of tragedy, with clearing some debris. But when it comes to the urban forest, there really is quite often a lack of any structure in place to handle things. A challenge for Joplin is the fact that the city does not have an ISA-certified forester on staff. The burden of many tree-related decisions is therefore falling to the Director of Parks and Recreation. The city has a relatively new tree board. There is a Conservation Department urban forester in the area, and all are really kind of doing their best to try and figure out how to stay on top of things. And I think Leland also mentioned this about the symbol that trees are, and that really mobilizes people. And really one of the tougher challenges is really managing public's expectations. There was so much coverage about Joplin at the national and local levels. And so our organization and many other organizations, we're hearing from people all across the U.S., individuals, groups, nonprofits, et cetera, that want to help and they want to plant trees and they want to do it now. And as you might imagine, because the destruction was just so severe, planting trees is not really at the top of the to-do list right now. So it's a challenge to really kind of manage or harness that outpouring of support, and it's important very early on to know also where to direct people. So I think by the time this is all over with, we'll have a pretty good model in place for the next time around that something hits, but this time we're all kind of learning as we go. There's an educational component in here. You know, as I said, you know, people want to plant the new trees right away, even if it's 100 degrees. And right now there just isn't a plan or infrastructure in place that's just specifically geared towards a planting plan and taking care of those trees in Joplin. And what is it they say, that out of chaos springs opportunity? Well, there's a lot of opportunity down in Joplin right now. It's their chance to develop a comprehensive disaster response reforestation plan so that their community and others can be better prepared next time a storm of this magnitude strikes. At last week's Missouri Community Forestry Council meeting, we had quite a lot of discussion about roles and responsibilities and how each of our organizations can help, both in terms of coordinating the response and with planning for and planting new community forests. And I'm going to provide a disclaimer here that Forest Relief, we're not located in Joplin, and we've not been named as the official clearinghouse or coordinator for reforestation. If I had to say, you know, what I'm doing right now, what my role is, I would call myself kind of a friendly agitator. I've been pushing through Missouri Department of Conservation, Missouri Community Forestry Council, with anybody I can, kind of pushing for those things so that Joplin can get someone or some group on the ground and take some of the pressure off the city. So it's been 3 months. Where do things stand right now? It's kind of hard to believe it's only been 3 months. As I said, because Joplin doesn't have the urban forester on staff, the Director of Parks and Recreation is really the de facto coordinator for tree-related issues. The Department of Conservation and State Emergency Management assistance group, organizations and FEMA, they're all working together, more or less, to perform those dangerous tree assessments, to mark those that have to come down, and then to make that happen. One interesting result of all this is that several Conservation Department and other certified foresters are currently undergoing the strike force training this week. And so that when the next major storm event occurs, Missouri is going to have a trained group of foresters to perform these assessments here and, possibly in other parts of the United States. In fact, my forester, Mike Walsh, is taking part in that training right now. The city is receiving some long-term assistance from AmeriCorps volunteers. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing right now, but I've been told that they are there and will be there for the long haul and will be kind of the core group of people to help with planting trees for the city. As I mentioned, there's just a lot of pressure that starts to come to bear on getting trees planted, and I'm sure everyone listening to this conference right now would agree that that would be foolhardy to start planting trees immediately, but there is political pressure that is happening. I've recently learned that the city Parks and Rec director has been told they need to figure out a way to plant 5,000 trees this fall. But most everybody that is connected with forestry in that area would say, fall 2012, spring 2013, that's really a better target. There are two main foundations that have kind of risen up as being kind of the go-to place for financial donations. The Community Foundation of Southwest Missouri has a Trees for Joplin Fund, as does the Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation. And we at Forest Relief of Missouri have also set up a designated fund for this purpose. And we have been seeking out private grant funding, and because we recognize that this is going to be a long-term process. And it's so we're trying to target some of our grant requests to take care of some facets of this as well. And there are lots of smaller groups coming up every week. Some of them more legitimate than others, but we're trying our best to kind of manage the messages that, you know, if you want to donate your money, these are places that will make good use of it. The roles for Missouri Community Forestry Council and the Department of Conservation are essentially providing education, advice, support, and also with facilitating communications, which we see as also one of our roles. Just from our perspective, since this disaster hit, we have been answering inquiries, offers of support, and trying our best to manage people's expectations. I did just learn of a group called rebuildjoplin.org, which is an initiative of an established educational nonprofit down in the area called Bright Futures. They have a pretty good website. They look to be a good clearinghouse for Joplin for people who are looking to help and whether looking to help or needing help. However, there is still just a real need for dedicated support and coordination of reforestation over the next several years, and it's just targeted at, you know, the trees. There are a lot of new Facebook pages that are being set up. When we discover them, we make contact with them to let them know who we are, what we know, who the key players are. Because we are very involved Missouri Community Forestry Council members, and we have worked closely with the department for a long time, we have made sure that Joplin officials know what we can provide, and we are there when they're ready. And we're coming up with some kind of creative ways that we might be able to do to provide, you know, thousands of trees at a time versus, just kind of outside our normal model. So all of those sort of plans are, you know, still kind of coming together because, as I said, I mean, the city, they're not ready. They're not ready to start planting any trees. And I mentioned that we're seeking the private grants and individual donations and reaching out to those other foundations that are out there just to let them know what we are, what we can do when the time is ready, because I think, you know, some of those organizations have collected a significant amount of money, and you just want to make sure that they, when it comes time to disperse those funds, that they're putting their money where it really needs to go, and that they're dealing with, you know, a worthy cause. And so we're, you know, making sure that kind of we're in there and they know what we do. And finally, and this is really just a direct result of Joplin, just because of the magnitude of what's happened down there, and, you know, and just compounded by all the other storms, and, you know, and who knows what's going to happen in the future, but we do have the capacity to expand, to add 5,000 more trees, and so have made a decision that we will do that next spring, plant those additional seedlings, and we will start planning in terms of setting aside trees that are specifically for those purposes, and really kind of planning too for Joplin, because what grows well in St. Louis doesn't necessarily grow well in the soil and in the climate in Joplin. So we are trying to become a little more proactive instead of reactive as we have been in the past. That just reminded me of, there is a group that has been started down in Joplin by a high school student called A Tree Grows in Joplin, and the only trees that they're soliciting donations, and the only trees they're going to plant are flowering dogwood, because that is the Missouri state tree. Well, I mean, you know, from a forester's perspective, it's like, oh, they couldn't pick a worse tree to plant. But, you know, again, that's where that education component really comes in. So conclusions from our perspective, and I'm sure you're going to hear a whole lot more about this from Max since he's been through this, is to be prepared and to really, you know, have that plan for disaster forestry emergency response and long-term reforestation, you know, based on lessons that were learned from other communities, so for that Boy Scout motto. And related to that, And we really have tools now that we never used to have. We've got technology. We have Facebook and Twitter, and use those tools. But first, figure out who's in charge. That's the most frustrating part about all of this for me personally, but also I think for everyone in Joplin, for it's that feeling of we're not sure what to do next. So if you have a plan in place that says if this happens, this is who we're going to put in charge, or the type of person, or this is the kind of task force we're going to bring together. These are the stakeholders, their responsibilities, and we know who's going to be responsible for managing communications, which also includes, of course, managing expectations and all of those various, offers for help. That will just go such a long way, because that's been, frankly, this is not something that I thought was going to even be part of my goals for this year, or would take so much time, but it is. But I do think it's so important that, that's why, like I said, I'm sort of the friendly agitator. I'm kind of pushing to make sure, that we do the right thing, and we can get, help Joplin realize the opportunities that are out there to, reforest their community. So that's all I have.
Great. Thanks so much, Donna.
Sure.
So what we want to do now is open the line for questions so people can get some answers. Jennifer, will you let folks know how they can ask their questions?
Thank you. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1. Make sure your phone is not muted and record your name clearly. Your name will be required in order to introduce your question. To withdraw your question, you may press *2. So once again, to ask a question, press *1 and record your name. Just one moment for the first question.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. And I also want to let folks know that if you would prefer to type your question in using the Q&A tab at the top of your screen, you can also submit your questions that way, and we will read them over the line if you don't want to speak on the phone. While people are coming up with their questions, the first one that I want to ask quickly is just, Donna, what was your experience with residents in Joplin? What's been the response there? Because sometimes folks, are say we've had enough of trees, like they've caused so much damage, but sometimes people are very eager to get them replanted. What was the response in Joplin?
I really think that everything that I've been picking up on anyway from residents is that they are anxious to replant quickly. And there's also kind of this, there was a meeting yesterday that was facilitated by FEMA down in Joplin, and I was reading about that this morning, and there is a growing group of people who are really committed to, okay, let's do this the right way. Let's start planting. When we plant in parks, let's also make sure that we, take a step back and look at the park and how we use it, and, do we want to use it for community music festivals? Do we want, instead of let's just put the trees back where they were. So, and I know that there's also going to be a real push coming from other groups like Department of Conservation to say this is an opportunity to not just put those street trees back in, in little bitty boxes, but maybe, use some new technologies. And honestly, I think that because this is on such a large scale, the money will be there to really do some interesting things. But in general, I would say that the residents they want their trees back. They want them back badly.
Okay. Do we have any questions over the line?
We do. We have a question from Don Kissinger. So your line is open.
Okay, thank you. I've got two questions, actually. With this replanting that will occur in the future, is it going to occur on residential properties as well? And if so, how is that determined?
Yes. There are a couple of groups that are focused just on homeowner trees for homeowners. We've also talked to some of those groups. There's nothing in our mission that says that we only will provide trees to public or nonprofit property. that has been our tradition. But our board is completely in support of making trees available where they're needed because, you know, to us, we want to improve the canopy. We want to plant, and we would rather see a resident plant the right tree than, you know, just go down to and buy the wrong tree and put it in their yard. So we have talked with those groups about figuring out a way to, you know, the challenge is to get somebody to coordinate what it is what they need, and then getting the trees to them, because typically people come to our nursery to pick up trees. So we've been talking with Department of Conservation about, and I talked with this rebuildjoplin.org yesterday about coordinating some special days that we would bring down thousands of trees in a tractor trailer and distribute them. But, you know, there's that coordination piece that has to happen on the other side. And, you know, not being physically there, that's really hard. But we're more than willing to also provide trees to residents. But, you know, as long as it's kind of, you know, a coordinated effort.
Okay. But my second question, you mentioned that there were a couple foundations that may be tapped or are willing to give funds for planting. Are those foundations willing to also expend money to, I guess, the city of Joplin for the future maintenance for the next into infinity, I guess?
Yeah, I hope so. That's part of my outreach to them is, and hopefully when we do have a coordinator in place, that, you know, I think one thing I forgot to mention is one of the other things I'm trying to really kind of lobby for, and Forest Relief is in a position that can do that, whereas it's a little bit trickier from a political standpoint. If you're a government employee, we're trying to lobby, and we're putting this letter together. We're going to get to the governor to say, you know, we've got $10.6 million for workforce help in Joplin. Can we use some amount of that for a forester and get somebody down there to do that? And so that then you got to have that communication piece between, you know, here's what we need, and it's not just don't buy me trees. You know, we need the support after the AmeriCorps volunteers leave. We need somebody that's going to help us maintain and nurture these forests for many, many years, and to, you know, make sure that that's built into the grants that they make. I think that by the time they're ready to actually disperse any funds, they'll understand that. Right now, they've just been collecting money. As far as I know, no funds have been dispersed from either one of those groups.
So what you're saying is the parameters really haven't been set up as to what the funds will be used for? No. Okay.
Nope, other than trees for Joplin.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is because we have many foundations, I'm from Wisconsin, for environmental causes, and some of them are for tree planting, but none of them specifically are listing the maintenance of these trees afterwards, and that's what I'm frustrated with.
The education element that, you know, and I think that the Missouri Community Forestry Council, the department, everybody realizes there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, if we thought before that people didn't really understand that, now we really know, because of, you know, the calls we're getting and the people who, you know, can I come to your nursery and get some trees and take them down there? And then they'll go home. You know, it's like you're trying to make people understand that this is a living thing and it requires long-term care and maintenance, and, you know, and it's not something that planting is just a teeny part of it.
So we've got a couple sort of related questions that came in over the web that are basically asking about other stakeholders and partners. Basically, have local electric utility companies and also local commercial nurseries been involved in this recovery? Sort of have they been around the table as stakeholders in the planning, and what kind of support or assistance are they providing?
Well, I don't think there's too many commercial nurseries around the area in Joplin. It's really not conducive to that. Most of the nurseries we have in Missouri are kind of along the I-70 corridor that goes from Kansas City to St. Louis. It's just climate-wise. That's not to say that there aren't some nurseries down there, but they're not really the grower-type wholesale nurseries. So I've talked to one of the local nurserymen here, and in fact, he called last week, and he, wants to help, wants to figure out a way, and I put him in contact with, City of Joplin. But before I did, I had to say, I just got to tell you, they are not ready for you to come down there with a bunch of trees. So again, it's that managing the expectations. But he also, one reason he was calling is he wanted to say, is there a bid process? Can we make sure that Missouri nurseries that we are in on this, and when it comes time, that we get those trees from local sources. So, no, there's no bid process yet, but I think those questions are being raised. It's just that they're still, it's still a mess. So, and I contrast that to what I thought was huge before Joplin, and that was St. Louis Airport. And I drove my kids up there so that they could see, because they always laugh at me when I say you have to go in the basement when there's a tornado warning. But and the trees that were down and all the windows that were out of the airport and just, this path of destruction, it was nothing. And in fact, in terms of the number of trees that we've worked with a couple of people to replace some trees from that storm, and I mentioned about Sunset Hills, but those are so, this is just such a bigger problem down there.
And to that point, maybe one final question over the web was from New York, Parks and Recreation, New York City, which experienced 2 tornadoes and a macro burst last September. And one of their real issues they've discovered is not reforestation, but actually addressing the many large stumps that are left over. Have you found anything in terms of funding or what your strategy has been to actually, before replanting, to deal with removing stumps and debris?
I will know a lot more after my forester comes back tomorrow, based on where things stand with the assessment that has recently been completed of that path, and they have been removing trees, and what the estimate is in terms of stumps and stuff like that, and getting a better sense of what the need is. But it's those sorts of things that are generally overlooked when you think, I just want to plant trees. That is part of what we're going to try to focus on to get some funding to help Joplin do that. And because, that's a great point.
Great.
You don't want to plant.
We did just have a comment from over the line that in the city of Eugene, FEMA paid for grinding stumps. So that may be something to look into.
That could be.
We'll take one last question over the phone, if there is one.
I show no questions at this time.
Perfect. Great. I know there are a few others out there, but we will get to them after Max goes. So thank you very much, Donna. Really appreciate this information on Joplin, and I know people are going to be keeping their eyes on this and looking forward to hearing more as things develop on the ground.
Awesome. Thank you.
Next up today, we have Tim McDonald, who is the Community Forestry Program Coordinator at the Kansas Forest Service, and also the Community Forester covering 27 counties in south central and southeast Kansas. He's been involved in the horticulture industry for over 25 years with experience in landscape design and installation, garden center operations, and nursery production. Mac is both a Kansas certified nurseryman and arborist and past president of the Kansas Nursery and Landscape Association. His primary responsibilities are assisting communities with the management of their urban canopy and offering support for the nursery industry. Tim is stationed at the John P. Hare Horticulture Center in Hayesville, Kansas, which is both a regional and national horticulture research facility. And we are lucky to have him here today to tell us about his experience with Greensburg. Thanks so much, Mac.
Thanks, Leland. Thanks to the attendees. We'll get started here. I'm going to give you just a little bit of history of what went through. Waiting for this to load.
Are you not seeing
Nope.
him?
Oh, there we go. Okay, basically, Greensboro, Kansas, town of 1,500, EF5 tornado came through, basically took 95% of the community and basically wiped out any of their tree canopy. This is both before and after pictures, and looks like about a 25% canopy. That's what we hope to get them back to. Looks like my pictures are kind of loading slow.
I'm seeing it bright and clear, but I guess just keep going. We'll wait for them to load so you can see these very impressive and scary photos.
This next, when I first went out there was about a week after the tornado, and I was told about this by a county agent. All the streets were completely cleared until you came down to this street, and they left the house out in the middle. Again, showing a close-up of the house. And the Wicked Witch is dead. The tornado damage itself to the tree canopy was, of course, twisting, shattering of the canopies. Virtually nothing was really salvageable in that core area. And the other thing that people didn't really recognize is the amount of trunk damage that happened. Those are really not salvageable trees, even though they thought, you know, hey, it's got a little bit up there, or those trees will leaf out from that. The infrastructure, of course, you lost everything that was above the ground. What remained was your utilities under the ground. But the amount of damage that was done to the infrastructure and the cleanup, as far as the road base and everything like that, you're basically just starting over. I apologize for the delay in these. For some reason, it's not loading very fast. I think you're getting them quicker than I am. Many setbacks. Of course, this year we've experienced flooding, we've got wildland fires, we've had ice storms, and then tornadoes, Tuscaloosa, Joplin. But I see any setbacks, there's an opportunity. And if you look at this all in one long word, do you see it, opportunity is nowhere, or opportunity is now here? Kind of steal that slide from Eric Berg shows many times in his talks. Greensburg took it on as an opportunity. These are basically the three things that remained after the tornado: the county courthouse, an old bank downtown, and the co-op. Fred Denicky, kind of the father of community forestry, basically said urban forestry came out of crisis. And the crisis back then was Dutch elm disease, and the crisis now for us in Joplin and Greensburg, of course, has been a tornado. Greensburg had the opportunity to start anew, and that's what they chose to do. They're going to build it back as a green community, which in turn slowed the process a little bit because it's going to cost you more to build green, and you didn't get that much in insurance. Donna mentioned partnerships. Partnerships are huge. People are going to come out of the woodwork. Somebody needs to be the clearinghouse for this, and myself and the Kansas Forest Service, along with the county agent out there in Kiowa County, the county extension agent, are trying to be the clearinghouse to do this properly and right. We're still not involved with everything, but we're still trying to be the clearinghouse for this. The bottom picture shows the tree board. We reactivated a tree board 2 years ago. The upper right picture shows the mayor given the proclamation, and next to the mayor is Carmen Stout, who's our county agent out there with K-State Research and Extension. She is my on-the-ground local person, and invaluable. She was the PIO officer after the tornado went through, and she remains working and committed towards the tree project to this day. Westar, somebody mentioned utilities earlier. Westar's Green Team, which is our energy company in the eastern half of Kansas, this isn't even their area, and they've sent their Green Team out there 3 different times to do plantings. Use your resources. FEMA provided actually 3 shifts of firemen that they paid for like a year after the project, so we put them to work with the tenders to actually watering the plants. The other, some people have brought up maintenance. Maintenance was critical in this. I did not want to just go in and plant a bunch of trees and walk away, pat ourselves on the back. The biggest thing is I wanted to get these trees established and started. So we've had an intern on the ground the past 3 summers that actually was responsible for caring for the plants because I knew the city could not have the time or the manpower. I basically split it up into some phases. Cleanup phase, which Joplin is somewhat completed with, I think. Salvage, there's really not a whole lot to salvage from a tree standpoint. Planning and education plays a huge role in this, in all the phases. And then replanting and maintenance, the reality of that, replanting doesn't really get started for like 3 years. And then your actual maintenance schedule should be another 3 years after that. We probably started that a little bit early. Greensburg did take it as an opportunity to redevelop and rethink about the way they were doing things, considered themselves green, integrate the green and the gray together, and they've done pretty good through this. It was our opportunity to project the right tree, right place, right way, and they are doing environmental education within the school system. My major responsibility was replanting the tree canopy and planning and the education for the community. Giving them any help I could as far as how to integrate the gray with the green. And I think this has to be replicated anywhere in the Great Plains. The major tree issues, of course, is the other thing I wanted to promote is a healthy start from the get-go. And you do that by proper siting, proper selection, of course, proper planting and maintenance. And again, not just walking away from the trees and planting trees, but maintaining them. Accomplishments so far, about 1,700 trees that we've directly been involved with, mostly public. We've been involved with a few tree giveaways for the private individuals. 4 parks have been replanted. We put in a tree walk at the fairgrounds, which will show people what to plant back in, what we're suggesting that they plant back in. And then we provided an intern, a vehicle, and a water wagon. FEMA, that question was brought up earlier, they did remove 600 trees. And then we provide all the educational materials. The first thing we did, and luckily it was you mentioned as far as getting into Joplin, I think one of the easiest things to go back and replant the quickest would be the parks. And again, like Donna said, but plan. Are you going to utilize that park in a different way, or are you going to use it the same way? But parks were what gave us a clean slate to start over, and were usually cleaned up pretty quickly. So we did go in the first fall and plant the first playground called Sunset Park. We put about 45 trees in. We had probably more volunteers than we did trees, which makes it interesting to try to organize. And here's the park today with the trees, with the wind generator in the background. The requirements for working with volunteers, of course, is that somebody needs to provide the loader. That's actually the mayor to help move the heavy lifting. Somebody to dig the holes. That U-blade was essential in the ground out in Greensburg. Of course, you got the bottom left with the volunteers, and then you got to be able to feed the volunteers. The other things required, of course, are public access or utilities, and water is huge, and then again providing the tools for the volunteers, and then actually thanking them. The other thing, another park that was actually planted by the CBS early show was what they call Big Well Park. The dead tree in the middle, or I say dead tree, it's somewhat alive. The architect just demanded that we left that in there, and it actually has to come out now because of defects. And there's Big Well Park today. With the tree walk and arboretum, we had an ag class come from Fort Hays State University. We planned 2 days for this project. They got it done in about 6 hours. It was a great group. Westar, again, their green team came out and augured the holes. We did correct the glazing from that auger on the side before we planted. We also last spring planted the 72 downtown trees in the tree pits. Need to switch programs here. concept of this project was great. They had some of these recessed pits, and I'll explain those a little further here. Waiting for it to load.
I just want to point out that this year, as part of all of these green initiatives, the town of Greensburg won a national Sustainable Community Award from Siemens and the Chamber of Commerce, and so they're actually going to be doing another large tree planting of something like 80 to 100 trees this year as part of this whole greening effort, and we're very excited to be part of that as the Alliance for Community Trees. Anyhow, sorry, continue, Tim.
No, that was great, Leland. Thanks for throwing that in there. Basically, on these, the recessed pits were recessed 18 inches. Basically, it took in the water from the gutters, and the city has promised not to use salt on the main streets downtown. It would collect somewhat in these recessed pits, but would also drain through a drain tile system and would be into collection bases. The problem was the first year we went out and planted these pits, they had no rainfall in the fall, in the spring, or in the winter, and in the spring. There was literally no water in the pits to water the trees, so we had to do it by hand. And then they didn't do a backup system of having spigots throughout the downtown system. This was the only system for irrigation, so we've had to go back and supplement it by hand. You'll see the two different type of pits, one that's flush with the ground and the other one that's recessed. Bottom left picture shows kind of the detention bases that collect the water, and they do utilize drip irrigation. Some of the problems with the pits, obviously you guys are kind of probably saying, oh my God, that's just a hazard, and it truly is for them to be recessed like that. The concept, again, is good, and the other problem with them, they do collect quite a bit of trash. But there is a safety aspect in there as far as they've only had one instance of somebody falling in there when the snow drifted across and a person thought it was solid and they actually fell in the pit. Plant selection is 3 big phases that we really wanted to promote a healthy start from the get-go. Of course, the first one is plant selection. This is one of the trees that we found that would tolerate any of the sites in Greensburg. Leland, I think one of the things we found out is that putting this many slides in, it loads slow.
Sorry about that.
No, that's my fault.
You may want to start advancing them sort of before you finish speaking, so that way it'll bring it up right when you're done talking.
That's my fault. One of the ones we suggest is found right here at the John Pear Center, the John Pear Cattle Maple, which is a southern seed source of sugar maple and is very tolerant. Another one that's out of the Pear Center here is now the upright hackberry called Prairie Sentinel. One thing I want to mention as far as like the difference between natives and exotic, I know there's a whole movement of natives, but to me one of the best ways we can improve our diversity in the urban canopy is to also incorporate exotics as long as they're not of an invasive nature. One that I always go to is the Persian Perodia, which is native to the Mediterranean, which actually is same kind of weather we'll have, is heavy rains in the spring and then nothing in the summer. Again, maintenance was a huge follow-up for us. We believed not in just planting the trees, but we needed to maintain them. We needed to get them reestablished healthy. The other component there is site selection. If you look at the major photo in that slide showing the grouping of honey locust with just 2 simple plants, a ground cover juniper and a grass, we need to create more environments like that for massing versus some of these other small places that we plant that really are not suitable for planting sites. Of course, proper planting, you all know how to properly plant a tree. Unfortunately, in Greensburg, I would prefer not to stake a young tree if possible, but out in Greensburg, typically it's 40-mile-an-hour breezes is just typical. And the fourth thing to choose is to do it properly. Do it the environmentally friendly way. Do bioswales. Use the environment to your advantage. One of the big successes out there was the Kiowa County Hospital. They did lead construction. their landscaping was phenomenal. They followed to the T as far as plant selection. They did the bioswales. They did everything they possibly could from a plant material aspect. We did some of the hybrid elms in there. They did perennials like nepeta and coreopsis, some of the native grasses, sumacs, yuccas, fragrant sumac. That was probably one of the best landscapes to be put in. And then they did the bioswales and the massings and that. They really did an environmentally friendly landscape. The other thing is they took an education approach to it. You probably can't read the parking sign, but that's for environmentally friendly vehicles, electric vehicles and that. And then they put signage in discussing their landscape and the bioswales, the use of bioswales. They made it an education opportunity. The school system combined all three schools together, grade school, middle school, and high school, and they also now became a county school and take in the two neighboring cities. But they, again, followed a very good landscape plan, use of proper material. They made a few mistakes. I'll show you right from this slide. One of the things they did, that is the south side of the high school, and they actually did plant trees on the south side. So many times in LEED construction, they make a LEED building, but they don't shade it or landscape it. But the school did a great job of implementing and properly placing trees for the best environmental benefits. Now, unfortunately, the photo on the right shows you a row of swamp white oaks directly planted under utilities. We are going to go in there and spade those trees out before they get any more established in there and put them out in the athletic complex. They did utilize bioswales and detention areas to utilize the runoff water. City Hall was LEED construction. You can see the grass plantings that they did up and down the streets. That can be both it does remind you of the prairie where they're at, but it can be a real issue from a trash standpoint and even a fire hazard. The new Commons building did integrate a green roof on it. And the downtown, again, just kind of shooting on their landscape, they did a lot of grasses. Courthouse was one of the things that remained. They did an extensive landscape around it. The tail of two trees, the bottom right corner is typically a 2-inch tree that we went in with, a landscape size material, but there were people that donated trees, nurseries that had overflow and that kind of stuff that donated 4-inch material. We do have to have a clearinghouse. Don't be afraid to say no. If the material's too big or it's just leftover material, it's material that's not suited for the area. This shows the community center and the new 4-H barn in the background, which is donated by Thank You New York, or New York Says Thank You. Those will be landscaped this fall, along with the art center that was designed by the architecture students at KU. The architect wanted to leave it open, but that does face to the south, so we are going to selectively put some trees in there to shade it. In case you've never seen the wildlife in southwest Kansas, there's a jackrabbit. The whole idea is we're doing a good job. We're getting a number of trees planted, but we got to quit patting ourselves on the back on the trees that counting the trees that we plant. We need to count the survivors. We need to get that maintenance cycle in there. We need to make that as important or more important than selection and the actual planting. We need to get them established. Just a few scenes from Greensburg's rebuilding, stronger, better, and greener. And thank you for your time, and I don't know if you have time for questions, Leland.
Yeah, we will have time for, I think, 1 or 2 questions. Jennifer, can you remind folks how to ask their questions?
If you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name clearly.
Thanks, Jennifer. And again, you can type your questions in over the Q&A tab. Really quickly, Mac, you mentioned so many of these really important components and some really creative ideas that you had to make this work and to make the replantings survive. You mentioned, for example, the interns that you hired to do the watering and some of the other work. where did you get the funding for all this? I think that's one question a lot of people will have. Is that out of your office? Were there federal funds or donations?
There actually were federal funds. We did write wrote a small grant that we got some initial funding through the Region 2 office of $20,000. Then I wrote a competitive grant in the first cycle of competitive grants, and we got that funded, and that was written right into that grant.
From the Forest Service or from FEMA?
From the Forest Service.
Okay, great. Jennifer, do we have questions over the line?
There are no questions.
Okay, good. So that gives me time to ask one that has just come in over the national thing. Over the internet. What was the role of national partners as recovery started? And I know you have some good thoughts here.
FEMA came in right away and did over 600 removals, including the pulling the stumps and the grinding and that. Now I have had to go back and I'm going to use some of the U.S. Forestry funds to remove about 60 to 65 more trees that we've marked. But FEMA was a great partner. They actually came in and did a bang-up job. That was a huge partnership. Just the fact that the U.S. Forest Service, they were a great partner in providing us some funding. You know, this was a small community, did not really have the funds, but I think they saw that they were wanting to do this as a green movement, and that helped us a lot, I think, in getting the grant. And there's numerous regional and state groups that came forward, but those were our biggest federal partners.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you have further questions, I'm sure that Tim and Donna would be happy to answer them. This recorded session of the presentations, along with a related resource list, is going to be available in about 1 week on the Alliance for Community Trees website. So if you want to follow up with sort of rewatching a lot of the great information that was presented here today, you can do that for free. We will send out the link to that recording and the resource list to everyone who completes this survey that you can see right now. We'll also email out the link to this survey so you guys can just help us understand a little bit better about what you're interested in so that we can present webcasts about the topics that matter to you. I want to let everyone know that our next webcast coming up next month is creating win-win internships, how to make sure that you're getting the most out of your interns and how to make sure that they are getting the most out of their time with you. And that's coming up on September 15th. Again, the survey is in front of you on the screen. Please take a moment to complete that, and we will send you all of the good resources and the recorded presentation from today's session, which was fantastic. And I want to say a big thank you to our presenters, Donna Coble and Tim McDonald, and also to everyone for participating, anyone who listened in across the country today, and of course to our sponsor, the USDA Forest Service. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.